Junior Volleyball Association presents Sideline Strategy, a volleyball podcast. Today's episode features Russ and Mike Lingenfelter as they discuss creating a culture of unentitlement. This audio comes from a pre-recorded webinar that took place in 2018.
Russ is the leader of a women's volleyball powerhouse who's kept his program among the nation's elite for 40 years. He's guided his teams to a record-setting 7 NCAA titles, including an unprecedented 4 consecutive championships from 2007 to 2010. Along with 17 Big Ten titles, his program is one of only 2 women's volleyball schools to compete in all 37 NCAA Division I women's volleyball championships. He's produced multiple Olympians, 4 AVCA National Players of the Year, 14 Big Ten Conference Players of the Year, and at least 1 AVCA All-American in 38 of 39 complete seasons.
Mike Lingenfelter is the co-director of Munciana Volleyball Club since 2006. He's also the Munciana Samurai head coach and has won 5 national championships. Mike led Wapani High School to 3 state championships, and he has been named the Indiana Coach of the Year 3 times. All right, Russ, we're going to start with you talking about some culture. You have won 4 consecutive national titles from 2007 to 2010, along with back-to-back 38-0 seasons in 08 and 09. Can you describe the foundation of your program's culture and how your coaching philosophy plays into the consistency of the culture you maintain year after year?
Well, I think, primarily culture is something that it's something that you hope to establish early. So the culture of the program that I tried to establish in 1979 was about working hard and getting people to sacrifice for the team to be good, for the players to strive to be the best they can be all the time, and to not really worry in a college setting about what everybody else is having. So I think, the success that later teams had can be attributed to a lot of factors. Certainly, culture would be one of them, but I think what changed at Penn State, at least, is when I started, we only had 3 in-state scholarships, and then as the progression over the years, when we joined the Big Ten Conference, is when Penn State gave us a full allotment of scholarships. So when we had a full allotment of scholarships, we were able at that point in time to combine the fact that we had a good culture already in play, and then when we started attracting better players with a good culture is when we were able to achieve something that was special at that time. I don't think that just recruiting at the college level will guarantee success. Certainly, it's a major factor, and one would be naive to think that it's not. But I think culture has way more to do over the long-term implications, especially, again, we're dealing with, I've never run a club program. I've never coached a club team. I've done a number of junior things, but it's just a different avenue for me to be talking about when I'm looking at a college program, because in my world, I recruit players and we give them scholarships. So in our case, if we're giving them a scholarship, it's different than the club environment that Mike can address, where players are paying to be in the club. So, I know there's certain clubs that I enjoy recruiting in because I know those players are working hard, and the club coaches that I might be more familiar with, I know are more likely to tell those kids the truth and work them hard. And I'm willing to walk away from a good player because I don't want to deal with somebody who I think is going to be a pain in the butt. So, for me, a kid could be a great player, but if I sense that it's going to be a problem, I don't need a problem over the course of 4 years. My philosophy, if I had to say what's my philosophy, is if a player is great but she's a pain, if she goes somewhere else, she can only beat me 2 times a year for 4 years. That's 8 times. If she comes to my school and I knew she was a problem, she could reach 8 in a row, 8 days into her career. I could have those 8 days covered. So, man, I'm willing to walk fast if I can, if I sense that it's going to be a problem. But I'll let Mike talk a little bit about certainly the things that he can touch on.
Well, I tell you, I absolutely loved your math there. The 8 is great math. One of the things that, when we first started talking about doing this, I got the feeling that this was going to be Pee Wee Herman going one-on-one with Shaq, Russ, and that's kind of how I feel talking after you. To be really honest, in regards to culture, I think that it would be maybe a foundation for me. Our culture is about hard work. It's about honest communication, and I'll come back to that. It's about accountability, which is a lost art in this day and age. I also think it's about relationships, and I think sometimes we miss that in coaching. So to best answer the question on our culture, hard work, honest communication, accountability, relationships. In regards to my philosophy, it's simple. I love competing. I think that, once again, that's a lost art in today's society. I think that we've got to teach competing. We've got to let kids know it's okay to compete. Mine's kind of a trilogy, or a competitive cauldron of sorts. I want the kids to first compete with everybody. I don't care if you're combing your hair. I want you to be first. You eat your dinner, you clean it first and get out of there. I want each kid to compete with their counterparts or even teammates. I beg my kids to compete with me as a coach. That's the only way I can get better. I want them to demand more of me and try to push me to have to broaden my horizons. And then ultimately, as a coach, I want them to learn to compete with themselves, to be able to win themselves. I always tell my kids that, ultimately, before you can win the man across the net, you got to win you. And so I want them to compete with themselves. To be really honest, the only way to make that culture and philosophy mesh, I've got to be really straightforward. And I'm not talking about just your regular straightforward. I'm talking between the eyes honesty. Sometimes you just got to say what you got to say. And I never try to trick a player or manipulate them. I really don't have time. I'm getting too darn old to go back and have to think about what I said last week. So I don't want to have to change my mind based on what I said. I want to be very honest and very truthful with those guys. And I believe the only way you can create a relationship with kids is to be honest. So I think culture-wise, I think Russ hit on it. Our kids tend to really work their tails off. But our kids are open to taking honest criticism. And that's one of the things, if you're going to move to the next level, you better be able to take criticism. And I'm not talking about a kid going from Muncie to Penn State. I'm talking about kids going from wherever to the real world. And I think that's what our culture is about. And then like I said, I think competing is where my philosophy lives. And ultimately, there's kids competing with themselves.
Thank you both. So let's dive in a little bit on and talk about today's student athlete. Russ, what's your take? How's the college student athlete today different than 10 years ago?
Well, I mean, I think, like that Mike would touch on, and I would agree. First off, I'd say there's a school for everybody, and not everybody should be at the highest level, even though their potential might be at a high level. If their motor's not at a high level and they don't want to achieve great things, they should go to the level that they really want to be at. So I think, 10, 20, 30 years ago, there weren't a lot of really competitive kids out there. I think there's kids now that are way more skilled, but you have to find out if they're competitive, but their skill level is better, they're bigger, they're stronger. So, what I see, and I know I've had a lot of assistants over the years that have always indicated to me that I should change kind of how I recruit or what I say in recruiting, because it'd be easier to get somebody by not telling them the truth, by not telling them that the program is going to be hard. And as Mike identified, at least in his club, and I don't think all clubs are the same, that, people demand a lot of certain people. And so if I have some players that have the ability to be great, then I don't see why I shouldn't expect them to be great. And if I have some players that their contribution may not be great as a player, but they can find something else that's a really important thing to contribute, then that's where they should be great. Then that's what they should do. So I just think too much recruiting might be based specific on physical potential and not really looking at all of the components for where players really should go. I've felt that over the years we've had players come here because they thought we were good, not because they wanted to work hard to be good themselves and to keep us playing at a high level, or for them to become the best they could be, that they went here because we were at a point in time where we were really successful. And I think that's always a challenge. I receive, recruiting notes even today from kids saying, I grew up watching Penn State volleyball when Micah Hancock played or when Megan Hodge played, or, and it's like, hey, those guys are gone. And I'm sorry to say they're gone. Trust me, every day in practice, I'm sorry to say they're gone. But the reality is, kids have to really know what they're about, and to me, that really rests with the parents, the club coaches, the teammates of those club players to really do their homework so that people know the level they're getting into if they do want to play college volleyball.
So is there any adjustments that you have made, or have you stuck to yourself pretty consistently in how your philosophy has been, how you communicate with these kids over the last 10 years or so?
Well, I mean, I would say I'm a dinosaur in the fact that I'm probably to my own detriment not changing, and so I'm not. I'm probably stubborn in my own way, that I figure this is the way I've done it in the past. It's the way I'll continue to do it, and the next coach here can do it the right way.
Mike, what about you? What is your take on the junior volleyball athlete today compared to 10 years ago?
Well, I'm feeling Russ's dinosaur statement. 10 years ago, I'm going to preface my statements about how they've changed. Your question is how different the student athlete is. I don't think the student athlete's any different. When I say I'm going to preface my statements, I too am a parent. I too have brought kids into this world. I don't think the kids have changed. There was a great quote I saw from Greg Dale. He's a sports psychologist at Duke. And I can't remember the exact quote, but when he was reading it, he put it up on a screen, and I read it, and I thought, man, that's got to be from the 1970s. And it was a quote that talks about today's children. They love luxury. They have bad manners. They have a contempt for authority. They'd rather talk than exercise. They contradict parents. They tyrannize their teachers, basically painting a picture of an unteachable, unreachable, and a socially unacceptable human being. And it was a quote that was made, and I thought, well, that had to be from the 50s, 60s, 70s. It was Socrates. So, Brady, kids haven't changed. Kids haven't changed. Parents have changed. That's what the biggest difference is. We've spent so much time as parents, trying to, protect our children and bubble wrap them, that we forgot what made us who we are. So I'm going to argue a little bit with it. Student athletes haven't changed a bit. Yeah, there's some things that are a little different, as Russ alluded to. There's more glamour to the college game now. There's more exposure to the college game. There's more, I could argue that when I first got into this, that loving the game was your guide. And a scholarship may be a guide. If you really loved it a lot, you could get a scholarship. Now, The scholarship is the God, and kids kind of like the game. And that's the only difference I see. But I think that it's parents driving that change. And I don't think kids have changed at all. If they were that way in Socrates' day, I think that they're probably about the same today. We've changed as parents. And I guess in regards, your secondary question was, how do we adapt? Bree, I think that, we spend more time now coaching parents on how to allow their kids to be coached. We spend more time coaching our coaches on how to allow their players to be coached. We literally have to teach players how to be coached and teach those in charge of them how to allow them to be coached. That's the biggest difference, and it's an education, and it's okay to let your kid fall down and scrape their knees, because it was the scraped knees that made us who we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. That's an interesting answer. I think a lot of coaches are absorbing and thinking about what you guys are saying. We did get a question that I think we could address now, Mike, because of something that Russ said when he was speaking to the student athlete. What's your conversation like, Mike, with your athletes that want to play at the highest level, but they cannot play at that level?
Well, Russ would tell you right now, I'm very honest about that. My first comment always is, just because it's the biggest house doesn't mean it's the best home. Every kid wants to play at Penn State. Everybody wants to play in the top 5 teams in the country. But just because it's the biggest house doesn't mean it's the best home. In fact, the critical element is finding the proper home for you. And I will constantly and very honestly tell college coaches, if I think a kid can't play there or can, I'm very honest and very conscious to tell the kid the same. A lot of times, and I've had kids leave the program because I just didn't think they were looking down the wrong street. But the bottom line is, the real critical thing, and I think it's what we have to think about as club guys, is we need to maintain our integrity with the college coaches and be honest about a kid's ability. And then secondly, we owe it to the kid to make sure that they have a quality experience. Me getting them ready to go play is one thing. Me making sure that they can stay where they're at, that's a total opposite thing. And so the honesty, for me, isn't about the highest bidder. The honesty is about the best home.
Great. Russ, you already started talking about this a little bit, but when you're recruiting your junior athletes today, how do you make sure you're communicating your program's expectations to the players and their parents in advance before they're committing to you? And what message do you make sure that you're getting across to them?
Well, and the scary thing is the recruiting is so much earlier than what I think is healthy. But I think what has always been the case here is just kind of telling them the truth about, how the program is run, that it's about the team. I believe the players get better. We practice 4 days a week and we play twice a week. So the math would indicate that they have twice as many opportunities to show that they should be playing than not playing. That, I'm a big believer in communication, but I'm also a very direct person. So, they understand the process when they come in the door, that it's about them getting an education and being a good student and being a good teammate. I don't talk to them about, my goal is to train them for the national team or for the beach team or anything like that. I always say the same thing. I'm the Penn State indoor coach, and this is what the goals are, and this is why we've been successful, and this is where we would see your daughter or the player playing. And then I ask them some questions and ask if they have any questions. So, we kind of bring them in and kind of open everything and let them see what is really the case. I don't mislead anybody in any direction, because I don't want somebody to be here under false pretenses, because if in my mind, if I lie to a person, they're going to figure it out when they get here, and they're never going to trust me. And the only way they can get better is if they trust me. So the bottom line is, I just tell them the truth. Hey, if you're good enough to beat somebody out, you're going to play. And if somebody comes in next year and they beat you out, they're going to play. So that's kind of how it goes. But I'm not going to, I'm not chasing anybody away to get somebody better. So, over the course of my career, the people who have been in the program will talk about the loyalty factor that exists. And I think a lot of the success is about the culture that we have and how we run the program. And so to me, I think that's kind of how it goes. But just to touch again on what Mike said, and I know it's maybe something you might want to touch on later, but I think what club coaches can do is, or high school coaches can do is, when you talk to a player, is you say to the player, hey, when I talk to a college coach, I'm going to tell them the truth as well. So if you don't work hard, and if you're not a good teammate, and some of the things that you're always addressing with the player keep coming up, that is something that if the player addresses when they're younger, it's going to be better when they go to college. Just because they're a great player doesn't mean they're going to be a great contributor at the next level if they've got some flaw that everybody's willing to look past because they're a point scorer or their skill level is great.
And Mike, with your program, since it's with the juniors, the parents might play a little bit bigger role in the decision making. How are you communicating those expectations of your program to the players and the parents?
Well, I think the expectations of our program are the same thing. One of the reoccurring themes of this webinar is honesty and just being straight up with people. I think with us setting expectations and letting people know what we're talking about, I want to be upfront and open. With me, I'm very honest, and I let people know immediately I'm going to hold everyone accountable, starting with me. But honesty and accountability have to be addressed early and often and consistently. So for me, I open the season letting people know at the club level they're paying to train versus paying to play. And that's the difference between what Russ and I are doing. The sheer fact, though, I can tell you this, everyone is going to get equal training. I promise these guys are getting paid to train. So if, little Judy runs behind the bleachers and hides, I'm going to pull her little butt out and start banging balls at her just to make sure everybody gets the same story. Everybody's getting sung the same song in regards to training, but not everybody's getting equal playing time. And people have troubles with that, but that's life. If there's a disparity in training time, let's talk. If there's a disparity in playing time, I forewarned you. And so for us, expectations, it's a pay to train scenario versus a pay to play scenario. And we address it early, we address it often, and we address it consistently.
And do you address it with the parents as well? How often are you?
Oh yeah. During the first meeting, and that's something that I make very, very clear. In fact, Bree, I let those guys know that if there's an issue, if these guys are going to sit back and tally minutes played, points played, sets played, then you got to go somewhere else. Much like Russ opened with, if I have a toothache, I'm getting it pulled right away. I'm not going to wait 6 months and see if it gets better. And so I let those guys know right off the bat that this is the way it's going to go. I will train the heck out of your kids. And I'm not going to play everybody equally. That's just not going to happen. And the parents are in the room, and I give them the opportunity to either address me on it or get up and, shop. There's a lot of clubs.
And Russ, year after year, you bring in the top recruits in the country. I mean, these players are used to playing time, being the go-to player on the court. So there's got to be conflicts that come up. I mean, I'm sure you can think of a couple and maybe plenty more than that. Players unhappy with their role. They want to be out there. How do you have those conversations with them? Do you? How often? How do you handle it?
Well, I mean, I think you want players that want to play. You want the individuals to be competitive, but you also want them to care more about the team than themselves. But clearly, if they're unhappy and they want to go somewhere else, then we would encourage them to go somewhere else. But my communication method is I just call it a 1 minute drill, where I talk with every kid for 1 minute, and I would say, "Hey Jenny, this is what you're doing well. This is what we need you to work on. This is what I see your role going to be until we have another conversation of this sort. Do you have any questions?" And at that point in time, whether she's playing or not, then at least we've cleared the air. So if she's not playing and the parents say, "Well, how come you're not playing?" It removes the one part where they go, "I don't know, coach doesn't tell me." So I tell everybody where they're going, what's going on, including the staff, so that everybody knows what's going on. I do it after the preseason. I do it at the end of the Big Ten season before the NCAAs. I do it after the season because it changes. Maybe somebody gets hurt, or we need to shift somebody from position A to position B. But everybody needs to know what's going on. We're all pulling for the same team. I don't care who plays. I care how we play. So that's pretty much the way I do it.
And we actually had somebody ask, Russ, I know you guys keep stats, you use stats. How much do you rely on those when determining those key players that are getting playing time? And Mike, I'd ask you to address the same question.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting world that's out there right now because of the impact of Moneyball and just the way people look at sabermetrics in professional sports. I did my thesis on statistics 40 plus years ago, long before all of this information technology came into play. And I look at things, but I base my decisions on what I know and what I feel, because it's a team sport, and sometimes it's the energy of the group, and that might not be something that's determined statistically by performance. But I know a lot of coaches like to look at things, and so they may make decisions on those things. But I look at it as, performance. Certainly statistics are an accurate way to indicate how you're playing, but it's not always going to be the deciding factor on who's playing.
The difference, I think that's really odd, and I concur with Russ 100%. There was an old Mark Twain adage that about the average depth of a river that, explains statistics to the man who drowned in a river whose average depth is 2 feet. I mean, they can be misleading. Oddly enough, the biggest reason people in club keep stats is to validate things to parents. I think it should be just the opposite. I don't keep stats to dictate who I play. I keep stats to let a kid see growth. I think that we talked about entitled athletes. We've got to do things. I think the best way to get rid of the entitled athlete is to empower the athlete to become the best they can be. Make this about them. Make this about them personally achieving their goals, their dreams, and make this about me trying to tie all of those dreams of 12 kids together. Statistically, I could use those stats to let the kid know that they're trending in the right direction, but it's not going to dictate whether I play it. And the team, it's my job to tie it together and win titles. It's their job to be personally accountable, to be the best version of themselves, to incrementally get better in every game, every practice. So if I use stats, it's to validate some of the incremental growth that I may see or they may not be seeing.
Thank you. Erin, you want to move on to the next one?
Sure. Mike, how do you involve the parents within your club? What is their role? And do you have any advice for the parents that are listening right now?
Yeah. I think that the place where I involve, one of the things that I talk about a lot with our kids is GPS when there's something wrong, because you're going to deal with parents when something's wrong 90% of the time. And my GPS is just get the problem solved. But getting the problem solved, you have to address the problem, but you also have to give them a solution or a map to get home. So GPS is somewhat metaphoric in the sense that you got to provide a map, and we've got to do that. And so how to get parents involved? I think they've got to be involved in it in a couple of different ways. I may be the volleyball expert in the equation, but ultimately the parent is the expert on their child. And so they know infinitely better how to address, approach, and maybe the best impact their child. One of the things, they know what buttons to push. And so, in my world, I'm always going to enlist the expert. I'm going to always speak to the person who supposedly has the answers. Now, I'll let the parent make the final call or to dictate the decision. I probably can't do that. But, and mine is a little different than Russ's. Mine's, they're the consumer, they're the customer, and I need to involve them, in any way possible to eradicate issues or to best grow their child.
Russ, I'm sure you've had some experiences as well dealing with some unhappy parents. How do you handle that? Do you involve them? Do you go straight to the player?
Well, I would say you're more likely to hear from the unhappy parent than the happy parent, but I think I tell the parents more. I think I interact with the parents more in the recruiting process, and I always say to them, this is your daughter. I would hope that you have a continued vested interest in your daughter, and you're not just because I'm giving her a scholarship that I'm buying all rights and privileges for 4 years and she's mine until I return her. So, but if they ever have a problem and they need to call, they should call, but they shouldn't call and talk about volleyball. And I tell the players, because that's the problem that exists, at least I think in the college environment, would be players that are so accustomed to communicating with their parents that they tell stories that are maybe not accurate, and then the parent has they feel they should get involved, and then they get involved, and all of a sudden they're heading down the wrong path, and the kid gets caught in mom getting involved or dad getting involved in a story that's not true about somebody else. It's always about someone else. It's never about their daughter. So I always say to the players, hey, be careful what you tell your parents, because I know what you're up to here at school. So if your parents call me, think about how you would want to react if I told them what you were up to. So that usually calms that down a great deal. But I want to hear from the parents if they've got something going on with their kid. As Mike said, man, they know their kid way better than me. I want the kids to be successful. I'm not just messing with them to see if I can fix it. I don't want to have to fix it. I want the players to be performing at the highest level they can. And, I was saying to one of my players yesterday, the two kids are from the same club. I said, hey, you played with her at the club. How's the best way to talk to her? And the girl said, if you want to yell at her. I go, I don't yell at anybody. And they go, well, I usually punched her in the stomach. And I go, well, I can't do that either. So, whether it's a teammate or a parent, I think, parents should know what the boundary lines are, and they should try and be supportive, but they also should maintain a quality control over the interactions of their child. I have 4 children. I would have never had my kids involved in something and thought it was a blank period of time where I gave them away and I'll get them back and see how it worked out.
Good. I know we're going to keep getting questions about parents, We've had a few roll in. I think you guys have touched on a lot of those answers. Again, we'll leave time here at the end of the webinar to address a few more questions. So keep asking, those of you listening in. We want to get into consistency and support from administrators, club directors, your coaches, kind of the idea of keeping everyone on the same page. So you're not alone when communicating your culture and your philosophy. Russ, can you speak to the support that you receive from your administration and how important it is for your coaching staff to have a consistent message similar to yours when communicating with the student athletes?
Well, certainly, over the course of my tenure at Penn State, it's changed. I've had a number of different administrators and different staff members associated with the program. So, I think from an administrative standpoint, I know it's very difficult for a program to succeed without administrative support. But as far as my interacting with my staff, I always give them free rein to interact with the players. I think it's best that they all have the ability to be who they are and show their personality and work with the players, so I don't have a delineation that only I work with player X, Y, and Z, because I think players interact with different people in different ways. At the end, I make all the final decisions on certain things, but when I started, I was 25 years old, and now I'm their grandfather's age at 64. So everything has changed, but the important thing is that all of the players need to feel that there's someone that they can communicate with. And so therefore, the hiring of a staff that feels comfortable interacting and being themselves. And, so I'm not a micromanager and want to be involved in everything. I want everything to be good for the players so that they can have the best chances of being successful.
And then Mike, on the club level, could you kind of just talk about the importance of staying consistent throughout your club with your philosophy and staying on the same page with all of your coaches, backing each other up?
That's one of the difficulties. I think down deep, every organization, team, whatever, faces the same thorny problem. How do you get a bunch of individuals to combine into a single selfless entity? I mean, how do we create buy-in? How do you create trust? How do you create cooperation? I believe you do this with clear, concise, and definitely consistent communication. And I think that we've got to communicate constantly with our coaches and let them know that it's okay to fight the fight, and they've got to. I look back, as a coach, if I hated your lack of effort on Tuesday and you bring the same garbage on Wednesday, I've got to go to war again. I don't go to rest. And what happens is sometimes people start to lack that will to fight the good fight every day. And I've got to stay on coaches, and I've got to make sure that our philosophy is not a day on, day off thing. And so the ones that are really good, I think the coaches that are really good are the ones that go to battle and understand they go to battle daily. And they communicate their intent, their philosophy, their culture every day, not every other day. And they fight fatigue, they fight frustration, they fight the wear and tear of a season, and still passionately communicate what they're about. If I'm gonna jump on you on Tuesday, I can't let it go on Wednesday. It's no different than raising a child. It's no different than teaching a class. And I think for us, that's the key. It's critical to be consistent in communication.
Right.
All right, so we know you guys have a lot of advice. You've already given a lot of it on today's webinar. Here's where we've got these club directors listening in today. They're thinking ahead to this season and how they're going to be handling these parent meetings and meeting with their coaches, training their coaches, recruiting, how they're going to help their athletes. So Russ, what can club directors and coaches do to better prepare their student athletes for what's ahead at the collegiate level? I mean, that's a pretty broad question, but way to really impact them if they're wanting to play at the next level? What can they do and to prevent entitlement from these players that are, entering the college game?
Well, I mean, I think I touched on it earlier by certainly having an environment and culture where you're telling the kids the truth, and I don't know if that exists in all of the various clubs, because I know that there's recruiting and various activities that probably enter into the gray area in that world, the same as it does in the collegiate environment. So I just think from a club director, the hiring of a good staff to me would be the most important component, making sure that you have a good facility, making sure that safety is a priority, making sure that all of the things that you should have covered to make sure that the environment is a safe one is covered. From a coaching standpoint, I would think keeping the number of players to a workable number is probably the best idea, and having the conversation with players, is it better for a talented young player to play up to get exposure, or is it better for her to play with her age group? And that's a conversation for families and other people to really make. I had somebody calling me today asking about, hey, should player X leave this club? And hey, I don't tell anybody to go to any other clubs or do anything. That's not my business. So I think it's important for me. I like to stay in my lane. I know a lot of college coaches like to have their hands all over everybody else's business, and that's the way they want to do it. So that's fine. But, to me, the ideal scenario is for the clubs and the club coaches to try and help the kids and provide accurate information for everybody who is asking, and not just have a farm club where all of the players from your club goes to school X, Y, or Z. And, those are the sort of things that I think are, that I would think would be advantageous if I was looking at how to change part of the youth sport of club volleyball.
And Mike, as a club director, what role do you think coaches can have in shaping the student athletes mentally and emotionally to be better players, better teammates, leaders on their team, preparing them for college and just for life in general?
I'd say first and foremost, that was an answer by Russ that I hope a lot of people will replay and listen to again. That answer was perfect for us. For me, your answer to the question you just asked, Aaron, I think it should be paramount in our objective as a coach or leader. I don't know if do you remember the movie Jerry Maguire, when he had that epiphany to change the business model of like sports agencies to be a more family player first mentality? I had this same brainstorm last year. All of the clubs in America are touting and shouting about how many of their kids are getting scholarships, and and how it ends there. I've always thought that we've done a good job. I think we've done a good job of getting kids to scholarships. Once again, I think the scholarship should be the guide, not the God. But I do think that we've done a great job of getting kids ready to play and be successful on the floor. And this is where my Jerry Maguire moment happened. I think that I realized that we need to do more off the floor. We need to get these kids ready. So we started a program last year called College Prep Program, where we brought in experts in fields. We had people come in and talk about time management. My kids were blown away at how little time they would have in a day to do what they really wanted to do. They kind of learned that you have to do what you have to do, and if you have time left over, then you do what you want to do. We brought in people with nutrition. We brought in a college strength and conditioning coach, and these kids were blown away. And so I brought that in because I wanted our kids to be successful off the court. Our kids are having great success on, but off the court, that's where the traps are. and I didn't want my kids to be surprised. So we started that program. Just last month, I reached out to 8 college coaches, and I asked them, what do we need to do a better job of in regards to preparing our kids for the next level? And I got crazy answers. I got the obvious, first ball contacts, or, kids need to be able to train longer, harder. But I also got a couple of great answers. Teach your kids how to take ownership of personal growth. They're in charge of making themselves players. One of the coaches said they need to learn how to accept criticism. We need to teach those kids that criticism and failure are part of the growth procedure. And so to answer your question, we have a hell of a lot to do with getting them ready. And I think that if we're going to put this on the front of our website, that we got all of these kids going away to play, we should also put something on there about how many of our kids go away and stay. We need to do more to shape and bulletproof our kids for the next level. That's what parents are ultimately paying for. And I think that that's what we're ultimately here for, is to guide them to the next level and to continue to care about them even after they're gone.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right. So we've covered a lot of different topics. We're going to address some questions now. And, Russ and Mike, thank you so far for a great webinar. Again, we want to remind everyone, if you have a question, just type it into that question box in the control panel. We'll try to get to as many as we can here in the next 10 minutes. One question we have is from a club director. It's a newer club. Okay, so Mike, I'll have you address this one first. And then Russ, if you have anything to add, feel free. But the question is, what are the most critical or important factors of a newer club that wants to attain that high level competitive play? But right now they're newer, more regional. I'm thinking this is more from a structural leadership standpoint is what he's asking. What would be your advice as to what those most critical or important factors for this newer club are if they want to attain that high level at some point?
High level of play or high level of integrity?
High level of play.
The game is, and Russ will hammer away on this. I think make sure your kids can serve and pass. I would spend an inordinate amount of time on first ball contacts and fundamentals. On the court, I'm going to teach the fundamentals of first ball contacts first and foremost. And I think that through my drill work, I'm going to try to teach kids how to work hard. Those guys that work hard and care, the guys that work more, care more, get more. And I think those would be the elements that I would try to embed in my culture, is that we're going to work like crazy, because that's what's going to be expected in society. And then secondly, in regards to the game itself, I think first ball contacts, the guys that handle the ball tend to win.
Thanks. And Russ, we have a question related to burnout. Have you seen this more prevalent today than in the past, as far as kids entering the college level that have trained and played so long and are burnt out by the time they reach the collegiate level?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and I think two things come to mind. One, there's a physical toll that I think a lot of players come in to the college programs and they're physically beat up. They've played too much. They've played too much on sport courts, in convention centers that are cement money makers for people, that are a real problem for long-term healthy lifestyles. And for sure, because the good players are the ones that are hitting way too many balls all the time, because they're the ones that are the difference between winning and losing, and some of them even get some opportunities to play USA volleyball, or the regions put together teams so they get involved in some other things. So I think less is more. Kids need way more time to relax. I think the model that Mike maybe touched on of bringing people in and having some downtime for kids to rest their bodies before big events would be beneficial, advantageous, but I know it's really hard because I know even at the college level, I've had players that have gone out with the national team to do things, and they're supposed to be doing one thing, and then the national team coach says, hey, why don't you train with us over on this court? And no kid's ever going to say no to that. And then they overtrain, and, that's how kids get beat up. So I think for the players that are really good, you have to monitor their reps, their jumps, and they have to have the ability to tell you and the college coaches when they get them that, hey, my back is sore, my arms are sore, my knees, but they're never saying that in recruiting. But when they come in, and a lot of them have problems with their physicals, that's so it's a different level of burnout, but their bodies are pretty beat up.
And you touched on some downtime. So what's your feeling, Russ, on the 18 season changing, getting done early, and those seniors sitting around for a little while before they get to the college preseason?
Well, I think it's good, but then I know a lot of the college counter that by making the kids come in early so they can start training them. So again, I'm kind of a dinosaur. I don't want the kids. Mike had a player who graduated early, and we did the exact opposite. We let her stay and play with him because I felt she was going to be getting way more training in that world than if she would have come here, because I graduated 6 players and 4 of them went to play professionally. So I didn't really have a full roster of players for her to come in early and train. So in our case, it was, when people think about kids graduating early, check the box. This was the box that nobody would have thought was going to happen. So I just think kids have to be aware of that. Parents have to be aware of that. In baseball and Little League, we monitor how many pitches they have, and we do a pretty good job. And they even look at it in the major leagues, that when they want to monitor how many times people are throwing the ball to keep them strong. But we sure seem to be, and I'm sure I'm a violator of that over my career, with when I only have a few good hitters, as I have them hit too much. But I think it's important with younger players to get some downtime to keep growing and not beating up their body.
Thanks. We're going to address one more question and have each of you touch on it. Russ, we've heard a number of stories, pretty common now to hear of them, where a college coach, high school coach is being let go due to parent influence, going to the administrators, complaining over and over, and eventually the coach is let go. So do you have any advice for a coach who's maybe in this situation or is facing some conflicts with parents?
Well, I mean, whether it's the parents that want to get you or the administration that wants to get you, whether it's a high school or a college, and I would even think in some club situations, if they want to get you, they can get you. The truth doesn't necessarily have to be the reason that you get removed. Some people just want to get rid of the appearance of a situation that's bad. So, I mean, I think you can only do the best you can with what you're dealing with, and I mean, I've seen a lot of that over the course of my career, for sure. And I just think my advice to coaches all the time is, hey, everything you do matters all the time. And, sometimes the gun gets pointed at you, even though you had nothing to do with it. It just happens. Just, if you're a good person, you'll find another job. Don't worry about false accusations.
And Mike, if you could speak to cultivating the parent culture a little bit. I mean, this is so prevalent in the club scene, especially after the first tournament or two. All the problems start rolling in. So what advice can you give to coaches and club directors?
Well, the strongest court in the land is the court of public opinion. I mean, that you can't argue that. I think that you create your culture and understand that your culture may not be for everyone, but you have to create your culture and stay consistent with your culture and hold your ground on these items. I think we live in a time where, somebody writes a strongly worded letter to somebody in administration and people are let go. Our people need to understand that when their kids get out in the real world and you write a strongly worded letter to the president of Apple or IBM, then your child now is working at Subway. And so we need to make sure that we explain to parents that let kids fight their own fights, but the cultivation of what the parents do is on them. For us, this is our culture. We're going to stay consistent with our culture and understand that it's not for everyone. And like I said, I don't think you want to get in a battle with the court of the public opinion.
Thank you both. Erin, take it away.
Thanks, everybody. I want to thank everybody that participated in this session and remind you that you're going to be receiving the recording of this webinar within the next 40 days. So keep an eye out for that in your emails. We do have...
I want to add, if we didn't get to your question, make sure to reply to our email and submit your question, and we will find a way to get that answered and get you some information.
Yes, good. We do have 4 more webinars in our fall webinar series. The next one is Drive Your Team's Success with Stats, and that's next Wednesday. We will be including the registration link in our follow-up email, so you can register there. I want to give a special thank you to Mike and Russ for presenting today. This was an awesome webinar, and I know it's going to be very beneficial to all of our club directors, coaches, parents, and even players out there. We hope you all have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you for joining us today.
Take care.
All right. Thanks.
Mike, thanks, Russ.
Thank you.